to the Comedy Film Funnel. This is our third episode, episode 3, and the movie we will be looking at is 2004's Team America World Police. My name is Suzen Tekla-Kriglenska, and today my co-host Joe Dater is out of the shop. Even though it's only our third episode, I know that's a little crazy, but he has a book contract deadline, his first book, and he's losing his mind. So I was like, don't worry, really, seriously, don't worry. So I got someone to fill in. This is our first guest on the Comedy Film Funnel. Welcome, Corey Powell. Welcome, welcome.
I'm the next best thing. Thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah, I'm getting to that. You're our first guest. Okay. You're our first guest. So first of all, Corey is a science journalist. He is the co-host of Science Rules! With Bill Nye. Very popular podcast with about 1 million more listeners than this one. And he is also a writer for American Scientist. Had been with Discover magazine for forever. I knew him from there. He used to be my boss, actually. He used to be the editor-in-chief at Discover magazine, and I used to work there. Yep.
Yes, I was a whip cracker.
And is even, on television talking science. He's just one of the greatest science talkers in the world. And he's also one of the funniest people I've ever known. And he was on my last 2 podcasts, Shining 237 and Rosemary's Baby 666. We talked about the science of having Satan's baby. We literally, that's what we talked about, like how you would do it. And so, Corey, because you outrank me right off the bat, I'm promoting you to co-host right away. So you're not our first guest. I'm promoting you to co-host. Do you mind if you don't mind?
Sure.
With that comes a few benefits. One, for the next 2.5 weeks, you get access to Joe Dater's apartment.
Nice. Do I have to water his plants?
Well, that's the thing is I usually water his plants. So I have the keys. You don't have to water his plants. But I have the keys because of that. And so I'm sending this to you. Bring the family. It's a basement apartment in Queens. You're about a half-hour walk to the subway. You are near Popeyes.
Does he have a wicker bowl full of Kind bars or something like that? That would be awesome.
No, I know he has Cheez-Its. I do know he had recently bought Cheez-Its.
Cheez-Its are good.
I can't believe you're not jumping up and down over the Popeyes because that's what I would be all about. But he's near a very good diner.
But I have to tell you, so one of the reasons I'm not jumping up and down about the Popeyes is because although I love Popeyes, it brings a little sadness in my heart when I think about Popeyes because Popeyes makes a Louisiana Cajun turkey limited edition available at Thanksgiving, and 2 years in a row I've tried to get one and couldn't get one. So when I think about Popeyes, I think, what is a Popeyes Thanksgiving turkey like? But I don't know.
That's amazing. I had no idea. That's now on my life's goal before I die list. So you also get to, for the next 2.5 weeks, submit cartoon ideas to the New Yorker. I have not completely arranged this with the editor, but I know that at the New Yorker, they love it when non-cartoonists pitch cartoon ideas. They love it. It's like their favorite thing. It never happens. So you get Joe's apartment, you get to pitch New Yorker cartoons, because that's normally what Joe does, but he's busy writing his book. They need the help right now. All right. So thank you, co-host.
It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So we're talking about, unbelievably, Team America World Police.
Hey, terrorist! Terrorize this.
This was at the top of my list, and I knew Joe didn't want to he wasn't thrilled as I was about doing this. This was absolutely at the top of my list. I was like, come on, Joe. He's like, no. So I wrote to you in an email. I said, what do you think of doing this? And you immediately sent me back email after email with quotes from this movie.
It's not about sex. It's about trust. We've got to pass through the eye of the needle. Yes, like that.
So you like this movie, I think. I get the impression.
I do, in fact, genuinely like this movie. You don't have to sound quite so surprised, but yes.
No, I'm not. But a lot of people don't. Like I said, even Joe was like, nah, I don't want to touch this. And then after I rewatched it, I was like, should we do this? Because this is actually quite dicey. This movie is quite dicey. But I think we can.
Offensive in many ways.
Can do it. I think we can handle it. So this week I got an email from a 79-year-old woman who I talk to all the time, who I see all the time. It was my mother. She wrote me an email. She sent me an email and she said, I'm watching this podcast you're doing and I'm very upset about these F words. I'm very upset about these. She's like, why can't you be like that nice boy, Joe Dater, who barely curses? Now, I was raised, honestly, and I'm not really exaggerating much, that, my mother would rather I robbed a bank than use the F word. Like I was raised that the F word is like the worst thing you could do in the whole universe. And therefore, I love using it. Like, it's so cathartic for me. It's like smoking a cigarette. Like, I need to.
What about like shit and damn? Does that have the same?
I wasn't even really allowed to say God, you know, in the take the name in God in vain.
Gosh.
Like gosh. I've come back to gosh. I've actually come full circle and I now embrace gosh because I think it's sort of charming. But I do curse like a sailor. Like I do. It's because I was raised that it was the worst thing. And I mean, I never did drugs. I never drank. I was such a good kid. I was such a good young adult, and I'm still like I live like a nun. So anyway, so I want to say, first of all, there's going to be a bunch of F words. The theme of this movie is America. Say it with me.
Fuck yeah.
Right, that's the theme. That's the actual theme music of this movie.
America, fuck yeah. Coming again to save the motherfucking day, yeah.
So there will be a lot of cursing in this episode of
yes. Plus the central message of the pussies, the dicks, and the assholes. The
that's
fucking is integral to how that process.
There's going to be a blowjob theme that there's no way around. It's central to the plot. It's central to the plot. There's nothing we can do. This is not the one for the kids to watch.
Yeah.
So I just want to give everybody a warning there. So tell me about your, if you have anything to say about your relationship with this movie, you know, if you remember seeing it, what it means to you, all that stuff.
Well, first of all, I'm a huge Jerry and Sylvia Anderson fan. And for those of you, I don't know, they're maybe not household names anymore. They were the producers, creators behind Space 1999. And before that, UFO. And before that, Thunderbirds. And Thunderbirds was, I guess, their first big series. And it was puppet animation. I forget, they had some special name for it. It was like, super puppet animation. And I didn't even realize until I was rewatching it, there are a lot of specific visual references to the earlier shows, especially to UFO and to Thunderbirds. So first of all, this taps into my childhood science fiction geek tropes. It also taps into, I don't know, I grew up in a household, especially my older brother John is a very sort of kind of a rude comedy guy, and was from ever since childhood. And there's a lot of the humor in this movie that reminds me a lot of what my childhood was like growing up surrounded by just like nonstop offensive comedy. I later roomed with my brother, and we had a cat, and he named the cat a name that I actually could not repeat in public. It was so offensive.
Wow. Can you repeat? You can't repeat it now?
When he named the cat, I didn't know what that meant. Then I looked it up, like, I don't think I can say this in public, man. This is like really offensive.
Wow. Wow. Well, anyway, so yeah, I mean, I actually hadn't watched enough Thunderbirds to know. I've watched, bits of it here and there. I was wondering, I bet I'm missing a million Thunderbird real references, like real touchbacks. But also they really match the quality. I mean, it's amazing what they did on Thunderbirds. It was amazing. But there was no comedy content. It was dead serious. That's the difference. It was dead serious. But like the detail in the background and in the costumes is just as exquisite, maybe a notch less than what they were doing in this movie. But it's pretty amazing.
And I'm guessing you have not seen the show UFO, which was the successor. It was sort of the bridge show to Space 1999.
I remember Space 1999 very, very I definitely watch that all the time, but I don't remember UFO.
Was a successful one. So UFO has this great nutty premise that UFOs are aliens are infiltrating our planet in order to kidnap people and steal their organs, because this alien race is they're decaying, they're falling apart, and they need replacement organs. So they're stealing humans, taking out harvesting them for organs. The world governments don't want to create a huge panic and tell people that UFOs are doing this in the usual way. We got to keep this secret. So they build a secret base on the moon, and they build a secret base underneath a Hollywood film studio. Mm-hmm. And in order to keep this place secret, the guy who is in charge of the UFO detect and destroy program poses as a Hollywood executive, like a swagger-in hipster, swoop-haired Hollywood executive, and has to spend his day wandering around sets pretending to direct movies in order to prevent the world from finding out that we're fighting UFOs.
That's amazing.
It's such a nutty premise. So most of it is, blowing up aliens, but then there's also some stuff where he's like on film sets and pretending to direct movies and meeting with the executives and having to sort of go through his little song and dance. And
again, it weirdly jibes with this movie.
And then the other half of it is this moon-based set, which then they rebuilt into a bigger set. UFO got canceled. And they're like, what are we gonna do with this set? And that's bigger moon-based set became Space 1999. It was that was what they did with all, because these were all low budget operations and nothing ever got thrown away.
Yeah.
So everything from the previous one got recycled. So the little undersea jet plane props from Thunderbirds got repurposed into the show UFO as the undersea anti-UFO base, and you see exactly that thing popping up 2 or 3 times in the course of Team America. It's kind of nuts.
That's great. Oh, now I have the theme from Space 1999 going through my head. Martin Landau, such a great show. You have a lunchbox from that, right? I seem to remember someone gifting you with a lunchbox.
There is the Space 1999 lunchbox.
There we go.
But wait. The best part is, inside the Space 1999 lunchbox are the Space 1999 DVDs.
Beautiful. I love it when people have show and tell on the show. All right, thank you. That is beautiful. And were you a big South Park fan?
I was an erratic South Park fan. So I am of an age that I remember my college roommate's younger brother. He was like plugged into this internet thing, and he's like, "Oh, you've got to see this! It's this hilarious video. It's like Jesus versus Santa Claus."
Wow!
And it was the thing. It was the precursor of South Park. It was the original Matt Stone, Trey Parker video that kind of made them famous. And in the early days, when it was, very early days of being internet famous, they were very early internet famous for that video.
Yeah, it's one of the first viral things that there ever was.
Yeah. So I saw that and thought it was really funny. I watched early episodes of South Park, and I think I kind of drifted away from it.
Mm-hmm.
I would enjoy it when I watch it. I was not a rabid watcher, but when the Team America movie came out, sometimes before you hear a review, before you even necessarily see a trailer, you just have a sort of a gut feeling like, okay, this is my kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just saw it like, okay, this is my kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I watched it. It's like, yes, it's that Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle kind of thing where like you get exactly what you want. You want White Castle, you get White Castle. That was the feeling I had when I watched Team America. It's like, this is what I wanted.
And
I'm not necessarily proud. I might not tell anybody else it's what I wanted, but it is what I wanted.
Yeah. Well, coincidentally, that movie came out the same year, believe it or not. I do this every episode. I read some of the movies that came out the same year because it's sort of interesting to put it into perspective. Now, 2004, I was knowing you. We were actively I had gotten hired by Discover in 2003. So we were working together. One of the big ones was $1 Million Baby. There's a lot of sequels. Shrek 2, one of the Harry Potters, Spider-Man 2, the Raimi one, and The Incredibles, Napoleon Dynamite,
wow,
Dodgeball, The Passion of the Christ, which would be featured prominently in a South Park episode, Day After Tomorrow, Meet the Fockers, one of the Lord of the Rings, Giggly, the famously bad Cat in the Hat, which never should have happened. From Justin to Kelly, which at least that was what it should have been. Like, it's terrible, but at least it's supposed to be terrible.
Yeah, it is. It is shockingly bad, and it's also clear that they had this idea. They're trying to make Kelly Clarkson, this kind of like live sex symbol, which she very much was not. And so they have her. They have her with this sort of like sarong or scarves, or they're constantly trying to do things to make her look like she's this like skinny little beach model. Which is, it's just weird. It's so weird.
Yeah. The guy she was matched with they were so wrong for each other. But I don't know. For some reason, I remember thinking, I don't blame this movie for what it is. I don't. It is what it is. Okay, Cold Mountain, which I remember being actually quite good. I remember Renee Zellweger was amazing in that movie. Fahrenheit 9/11, which we're going to refer to later.
Wow.
The
Yes.
Michael Moore movie, yes. The Aviator, of course, that was huge. I, Robot, you might have enjoyed as a science fiction person. Sky Captain World of Tomorrow, remember that? That I remember seeing in the movies
Yes.
with other Discover people. I did remember that. Sideways, Ray.
Wow.
Yeah, the big Ray Charles biopic. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Okay, just a few more. You Got Served, which ended up being one of my favorite South Park episodes.
Yes. Oh, yeah, when they get served and Chef says,
Chef, we just got served.
Oh boy. Well, come on inside, children. I'll make you some cocoa.
The subplot is Butters and his past, tap dancing past, where people died while he was tap. It's one of the best. Butters is like, and it's one of the best Butters subplots ever. It's so good, so good. Secret Window, which was a Stephen King story with Johnny Depp, which is actually quite good. Shaun of the Dead, Kill Bill Volume 2. I love Kill Bill Volume 2.
I can watch Kill Bill on endless recycle. That's another one that is sort of dangerous to tell certain people that you just enjoy watching Kill Bill over and over again, including my wife. Her respect for me goes down a half notch whenever I mention it.
I'm the weirdo who doesn't like Pulp Fiction. I just thought it was trying too hard to be what it was. But I love Kill Bill. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. So.
Yes. I'm with you. Because Kill Bill just kind of like, it just rolls along. It's just like, it's
so good.
Revenge after revenge after revenge. And it's all just set pieces, these balletic set pieces. And you just kind of like, it just washes over you.
Yep.
And when she crawls out of the grave and goes to the diner and sits down and says, "May I have a glass of water?"
May I have a glass of water, please?
I love Uma Thurman. Okay, Mean Girls. Wait, there was just a couple other important ones. Anchorman is kind of important, I guess. Alien versus Predator. I Heart Huckabees. And then, interestingly, Thunderbirds. There was a live action version of Thunderbirds. I don't know if you remember this. It was a British release.
No, I've completely blotted that out.
The same year as this movie, starring Bill Paxton, Anthony Edwards, and Ben Kingsley, a live action version of the Thunderbirds. Because actually, Trey and Matt had thought of doing that. They thought, well, why don't we just, do a Thunderbirds movie? And it was like, nope, somebody already has the rights. It was this movie, which came out the same year. Isn't that amazing? Nobody remembers it. Nobody. Even a Thunderbirds fan doesn't remember it.
Sir Ben Kingsley, I don't know. That's a tough reach to picture that in Thunderbirds.
And no strings. I mean, come on. You at least have, if you're gonna have live actors, at least put strings on them or something. I don't know. So Team America, World Police. Just quick synopsis. So it's all marionettes, an all marionette movie. Not a single human in this movie. All marionettes, and it is again based on not just Thunderbirds, but also Jerry Bruckheimer films. That was very much what they were thinking when they were putting this together. They actually wanted to do a remake of The Day After Tomorrow using marionettes, and they couldn't do that. But that was what they were trying to capture, was that kind of thing. Because they said they watched Day After Tomorrow and found it hysterical and thought, imagine doing this with puppets. It would just be pure comedy gold.
Yeah,
So
there are bits of Independence Day in there.
Yeah. So basically, it's this team of American police, like world police.
The world police are all American. That's again part of the joke. That's
part of the joke. So so it's lampooning our politics, of course. This was 3 years after 9/11. So we were already, had invaded and Afghanistan and all that stuff. And it was sort of about this concept of America thinking it needs to be the big savior of everybody, and at the same time, destroying everything in its path. Which is beautifully portrayed in the opening scene of this, which we'll get to in a second. And so this team of young, handsome, and pretty model-looking young people who are marionettes, they have a leader, Spotswood. So so of course the movie's just full of terrorists. And of course, Kim Jong-il is famously in this. And, the concept is he's supplying weapons of mass destruction to the terrorists. One other element of this is celebrities. So this cadre of celebrities believe that we should not be interfering with the world and trying to save the world and trying to put a leash on Kim Jong-il. So they kind of fall for this whole plot that Kim Jong-il has. Of course, he does have weapons of mass destruction, and he is distributing them to the Middle Eastern and Russian and Chechenian terrorists. So he has this plot to put on a spectacle, inviting all of the world's leaders to North Korea to observe his spectacle. And while they're there, he's going to set off weapons of mass destructions all over the world and turn the entire planet into a third world country. So, of course, they have to save themselves. That's the basic gist of it. So this movie was a very, very much a multi-million-dollar movie. At this point, these guys were rolling in dough. They had done South Park now since 1997 to much success. We're talking much success. They had put out a cartoon movie that everybody said, do it, but we don't know that it's going to be successful. And it was gangbusters. Everybody loved it, got critical acclaim, the whole thing. And we're going to talk about that movie too. So they could really do whatever they wanted. They didn't really expect to do another movie, but they just had this idea and they thought, they got this itch to do this. So they did it. So they put together a team that is pretty unbelievable. Their director of photography for this was Bill Pope, who did The Matrix. He had done The Matrix. He already had The Matrix under his belt. And they got him as the director of photography for this.
Wow.
He also had done Army of Darkness, by the way. Spider-Man 2, Clueless, and
so the Matrix parody scene is legit. That's legit. It's not just because there have been a lot of Matrix parody scenes, but the bullet time, mid-air kung fu.
They had to do it. They had to do it. The costume designer was Karen Patch, who had done the Royal Tenenbaums and Rushmore and School of Rock. And I mean, the costumes are amazing in this.
You mentioned School of Rock. I just have to tell you the story because I love this story so much.
Sure.
So there's a woman named Judith Love Cohen. She was an engineer working on the Apollo project. One of the few women engineers working on Apollo at the time. And one of the things that she was working on was the emergency rescue system, which ended up being part of what they used on Apollo 13 to keep the astronauts alive. While she was finalizing the engineering for that escape system, she was 9 months pregnant. She went to the hospital to deliver. She wasn't quite done designing it, so she had them send the engineering plans to her while she was in the hospital, getting ready to deliver. She finishes the emergency escape plan for the Apollo rocket, gives birth, and the baby that she gave birth to is Jack Black.
Really?
She's Jack Black's mother.
Wow.
And Jack Black was born while she was designing the rescue system that helped save the Apollo 13 astronauts.
Wow. Okay. Hats off. That's the kind of science Hollywood crossover information we need for the show. Okay. So the puppets were done by a group called the Chiodo Brothers. They had done Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Critters. They did Large Marge for Pee-wee's Big Adventure. They were the people who did Large Marge. They did a lot of stop motion animation. They did the stop motion for Elf. So anyway, that's all pretty cool. That was all before this movie. So what they did that was different from the Thunderbirds was these weren't just marionettes. These marionettes had motors in their faces. They had about 7 motors in their faces that would control their emotions. So you could see facial expressions. And that's why this movie is, especially kind of puts it over the top, because these are very expressive marionettes. Eyes, mouth, eyebrows. It's about 7 different spots. And the expressions were controlled by joysticks, but the marionette bodies were absolute classic marionette bodies. And most of the voices, of course, as we know, are done by these guys. And then a small cast of voices, nobody hugely famous.
Well, it does have one of my favorite actors, Darren Norris, doing the Spotswood voice. He's not a familiar name, but when you see him or when you hear him, you're like, oh, you're that guy.
And I get a chance to beat Dinkelberg. Every year, his team, the Dinkle Ducks, wins the championship. Just look at him floating in his trophy room.
He's perfect. I mean, the Spotswood's so perfect. So obviously the puppets, they were, very detailed, hand-stitched hair, the whole thing. And the molds were, every single one obviously was sculpted. Then they had real, like a skin that went over these sculptures. It looks like skin. And the props around it famously were just mind-blowingly detailed. You see in the Paris scene, the sidewalk is made of little croissants, right?
Not noticed that.
The pattern in the sidewalk is croissants. There's little topiary poodles, right? In the background of the Panama scene, it's all the plants are pot plants. They're actual pot plants. In the background of the Middle Eastern scenes, the palm trees, the leaves are made out of dollar bills, folded up into palm leaves.
Oh my God, this must have been a set designer's dream working on this movie.
These people were in heaven. I mean, the puppet makers and the set builders and the designers were just in heaven. They used for some of the Middle Eastern lamps, they used like a cheese grater with 2 colanders on either side. If you look at Kim Jong-il's palace, they took those, they found as many photographs of his actual palace as they could. But like in the chandelier, you'll see a little grenades hanging off of the chandelier or little bombs hanging off the chandeliers. You see like sort of the landscape of North Korea, the kind of clustered city in the mountains. Those are Chinese takeout containers and little, these little drink umbrellas, the little paper drink umbrellas you get, with the pina coladas. Like one of the Middle Eastern women who's carrying a basket on her head, it's filled with goldfish crackers. It's just like they really tried to keep things in here and there to give you scale so that you would be sort of subconsciously reminded that you were looking at miniatures. You'll see, coins everywhere, a lot of coins. You see toenail clippers hanging off Team America's belts, that as a piece of equipment, there's like a toenail clipper. In Kim Jong-il's palace, I did not notice this.
Now I need to watch it again, like frame by frame.
Absolutely.
Hours.
It's one of those movies. In I did not notice this. I know I didn't notice this at the time. In Kim Jong-il's palace, there is a statue of him in the main corridor. It's a huge statue of Kim Jong-il. It's a human. It's a real guy, just completely painted over as a statue. You can see him blink at one point, but you don't notice it because you've already seen Mount Rushmore. So you're used to seeing like huge statues. That's a real guy who's just simply acting as a statue.
A real guy in a puppet movie. Now I've seen everything.
So he's the only one. He's the only real human. I know that they spent for one prop, a miniature Uzi, they spent $1,000 making that Uzi. $1,000. Yep. So, yeah. I mean, there's also a lot of very realistic miniatures, and they spent the money. I mean, Kim Jong-il's furniture, his couch is just exquisite. The design of the interior of Team America's lounge area, which matches, the Thunderbirds swanky, very cool lounge area. You can see they spent, like money to make it look super cool.
So wait, is any of this in the Smithsonian? Where did it all go?
I don't know. That's what I was wondering. I mean, I'm sure so many people on staff, because there were so many people on staff. I'm sure everybody was dying for a piece of that. So I'm sure they're scattered all over Hollywood in people's homes, but hopefully some of it was preserved. And so, yeah, let's talk about this movie a little bit. Then we'll like sort of halfway through just kind of talk about these guys, Trey and Matt.
So the opening, this is something I just learned. The very, very first thing you see is this little, French puppeteer in Paris, and then it pulls back, and it turns out, you see bad puppetry, and it turns out the bad puppetry is a puppeteer within the puppet show.
Yep, it's brilliant.
So apparently, this little bit of bad French puppetry was a clip that Matt and Trey created for the studio executives to show them, like, these are the first rushes of what we're doing, in order to fuck with them and make them think that that's what the whole movie was going to look like.
Oh, wow.
And the people, there's like this uncomfortable silence in the room, and they're like, okay, it worked. And so they decided to incorporate it in the movie.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, you could totally picture them. You could picture them doing that. So yeah, so it pulls out to this beautiful, I mean, just gorgeous Paris. So they say that what they were always going for was the typical American who's never been outside of the US, their imagined version of what these cities would be. So you have the Eiffel Tower right next to the Louvre, right next to the Arc de Triomphe. Everything is just smushed together. there's a scene of New York City, Times Square, and the Guggenheim Museum's like right there in the middle of Times Square. I love that. And so anyway, so Paris is just, gorgeous. And there you could, the details just unbelievable. You can see in every shop window has stuff inside the window. They're real windows with real things inside the shop windows, and all that. And what happens is, some terrorists decide to attack, of course, Middle Eastern terrorists, and Team America comes swooping in. And what's the statement of the movie really is made in this first scene, which is they completely, they destroy Paris. They knock the Eiffel Tower down and it lands smashing onto the Arc de Triomphe. And they blow the Louvre to smithereens and nothing has survived within. And, in the end, all the Parisians are they're like, you're welcome, Parisians. And they're just
yes, we've saved you from destruction. Goodbye.
And their jaws are just hanging open because their entire world has been destroyed by Team America. So that's the kind of the point of the entire movie. At the same time, the movie also argues against that point, which is typical of what they do. So, throughout South Park, that's what they always do. They try to make both points, Yeah,
they enjoy offending everyone.
Yeah, they enjoy offending everybody. So we see their facilities.
Hold on, you missed one of the most important plot points, which is the loving couple about to, with the moment of engagement, and then the dead terrorist who suddenly rises up out of the water to shoot off one final set of rounds, killing the romantic who was about to get engaged to the female ingenue.
He had just asked her, they had been, finally he's going to ask her to marry him. And that's one of the funniest things in the movie, I think, too, is while they're in the middle of combat, they're always talking about personal stuff. Like Lisa, could you please not flirt with the guy I'm interested in?
These guys really snuck up on us.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around lately.
Sarah, I didn't mean to hurt you.
No, you just didn't care if you did.
Now come on, Sarah, that isn't fair. Lisa can't help it if Gary has feelings for her. Just like nobody can help it if you have feelings for Gary.
And so this is another one where, they're in the middle of destroying Paris and this guy proposes to her. And but then he gets killed by a terrorist and it's
killed, and you have the slow motion engagement ring rolling on the floor as he's dropping down dead.
Yeah. Of course, everything in this movie is a cliche. So Lisa, that's Lisa. She loses her love. So back at the ranch, at their facility is inside of the heads of Mount Rushmore. The jaw and the faces open up and they can land their planes and their helicopters, and the inside is their headquarters. Oh God. So all right. So then actually what we see is the New York cityscape, which I'm surprised they didn't joke around with a little bit more. It's a little bit too dead on to Times Square. The funniest is by far that they have the Guggenheim there in the middle of Times Square. That's hysterical. And they have like an ad for Jell-O, but otherwise I was surprised they didn't riff off of it a little bit more. So we close in on a Broadway show, which is Lease, which is a parody of Rent. And this is one of the most offensive things in the movie, but it is so funny. It is them doing a song called AIDS.
Everyone has AIDS. My grandma and my dog go blue. AIDS, AIDS, AIDS. The Pope has got it and so do you. AIDS, 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 come on everybody, we got quilting to do. AIDS, 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 we're gonna break down these barricades. Everyone has AIDS, 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 AIDS.
It's just like, how many times can we get the word AIDS into a song? I mean, it crosses the line, but it's quite funny. So I don't know. We're going to get into like this kind of we're going to get into the controversy a little bit of this kind of humor, but Mark Shaman was one of the writers of this. He had written Hairspray, and he's just a very famous songwriter. He does a lot of work with them, and the music is always great. The music's not as good as it was in Bigger, Longer, Uncut, I would say, but it's still it's pretty good.
There's a lot of good music in this movie.
There's some pretty good music.
It's got the montage song.
Yeah, the montage.
It's got the America Fuck Yeah song.
Yeah,
it's got the Everybody Has AIDS song.
Yeah, but there's not a clunker in Bigger, Longer, Uncut.
This one also has the extremely offensive "I'm so lonely."
I'm
song.
so lonely. Oh my God! All right, we're gonna get to that for sure. Yeah. Okay, so we're backstage with. They have such like normal names that Gary Johnston, of course, Gary Johnston. This is why I don't remember this name because it's so. So he's backstage, and the floor of his dressing room has playbills, and I'm sure those are real. Because these marionettes were about 2 feet tall, and it would work as far as the size. And he's approached by Spotswood, to join them. He invites them into a limo.
Oh, I get it. I'm supposed to get in your car, then if I go down on you, I get a movie part.
There's a lot of blowjob jokes, that are funny for a while. And then we're going to get to a point where it all comes to a head. And I don't know, to me, it's a bit much, but.
Well, you know, my inverse Laffer curve theory of humor, that, you know, the repeated joke, as you repeat, it gets less and less funny until it bottoms out, and then more and more repeats, it gets funnier and funnier again.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, so this is definitely, they're kind of experimenting with, okay, 1 blowjob joke funny, 5 not funny, but what about 10? Is it funny again?
And we have them actually do it. of course, it's Trey and Matt. So they're going to have to actually do that. So that's in your future here. Okay, so he gets taken back to the headquarters.
Yeah. So first of all, when they whisk Gary off in the limousine, then the limousine turns into the Team America rocket ship.
Yes.
You press the button, and Gary says, I'm roughly paraphrasing, "A limousine that flies? No, I've seen everything." And Spotswood says, "Have you ever seen a man eat his own head?" No. "Then you haven't seen everything, and neither have we." Whenever anybody says, "No, I've seen everything," I think, have you seen a man eat his own head?
Yes.
Most of the time I stop myself from actually saying it. But what I love about those kinds of jokes, I mean, it's sort of the nature of their humor in general, is, you know, all of the sort of like the obnoxious, bratty stuff. Just by sticking a pin in the cliches, you immediately realize how ridiculous they are. And so you're just that casual throwaway of, "No, I've seen everything." Of course you haven't. That's the stupidest thing to say.
So he meets the gang, the rest of the team. They meet intelligence, which is an acronym, INTELLIGENCE. We have no idea what that stands for, but it's a great joke. He's the computer that talks to them, of course. I think they should have made a little more hay with that too, actually.
Well, I love the voice of the intelligent AI. It's sort of like, "Dude, hey, I'm picking up some signals. I think there's going to be a terrorist attack.
I have intercepted communications that several terrorist groups are being organized for one massive worldwide attack."
Yeah. And it's got this bland little face. You know, it's like a little bit like, you know, throw back to South Park where they do Moses. I think that's Moses's character that's kind of like that.
I guess that would be okay.
And then and you know, again, this is only 3 years after 9/11, and they just, you know, they're of course going to have 9/11 jokes.
Right. So this the 9/11 math joke, which again they do twice, just in case.
I think they did it 3 times. I think they did it 3 times. Yeah.
Okay. In case it's not enough of a bad dad joke the first time, he says, "Yeah, Gary, what the terrorists are up to? It could be 9/11 times 100. You mean? Yes, 91,100." And then later they repeat it with 9/11 times 1,000. I didn't even catch they did it a third time.
Yeah, they do it like when at the very end in Kim Jong-il's little office. But actually, my favorite joke in that section is when they're like, "So Gary, that's what we need you to do." So they need him to be an actor. They, you know, because the spy really is an actor, right? And the conceit is that he's like the greatest actor ever in the world. You know, somehow they know he's the greatest actor. And so they need him. They need his acting skills.
It makes his top gun actor.
Yeah. And, you know, again, Trey and Matt, you know, have openly stated that they think acting is a joke of a job, you know, even though I think Trey wanted to be an actor at some point, of course, but
they were in basketball and they did not do a very good job of acting. So you might want to reconsider that.
Yeah. But they love making fun of people who are actors, you know, of course, the self-importance, but even just as a job, you know, they like making fun of it as a job. So that's what they're completely making fun of, the idea that, you know, like this is an essential skill that's going to save the world, is acting, you know, really good acting. And so all the jokes around that I think are really funny. At one point, they're finally like, "Okay, so we need you to go into the Middle East and pretend to be Middle Eastern, and you'll be saving the world from complete destruction.
If your acting is successful, you'll be able to get us all the information we need to stop this whole thing from happening. Of course, if you're not interested, there's the door."
All right, thanks.
And he just walks out.
There's also, they take one of my favorite bad science fiction tropes in here, which is the empath character.
Oh, God, yes, I love that.
Sort of like, you know, like Deanna Troi on Star Trek Next Generation, one of the worst science fiction characters ever, although women in general did not get very good treatment on that show. And yeah, the empath who says things like, I sense you're upset. I sense you're hungry. I sense you're speaking loudly.
I sense you're confused.
I sense you're confused.
She says that a lot. And I love that she's the empath, but she's just mowing people down like left. You know, she's like, I'm the empath. And then she just like literally murders a room full of people in the Middle East. They have a song, of course, Freedom Isn't Free, you know, and it's so funny because they're just propping this marionette up in front of like the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and in front of the Lincoln Memorial. They just sort of literally just prop the puppet up without even trying to animate it in any way and film that. It's pretty funny. Very corny song, Freedom Isn't Free. You got to chip in your $1.05. He decides to do this. Also, he's got a crush on Lisa. So yeah, that's been established too. So they go and as instead of a suicide pill, they give him a hammer. So, well, he's a marionette. So that's what you need to have. So they go to the Middle East and, again, it's really beautiful. The camels are beautiful. The marionette camels are gorgeous. It's a very beautiful setting. And I had totally forgotten that they riff off of Star Wars twice. It's not like they're making fun of it. They're tipping their hat to Star Wars.
Right. They do a cantina scene.
They do the cantina scene and they're in Cairo and he has to infiltrate. They make hay with him being a good actor and he's a terrible actor and he's not doing anything really right or wrong, but they let him in anyway.
Durka Allah, Muhammad Jihad. Durka, Muhammad Jihad. Oh, Durka. I've never seen acting that good.
He's amazing.
Team America tries to kill them while he's still with them, and he almost gets killed. But they rescue him, and just many Middle Easterners get murdered by Team America. We get introduced to then this is a tough one. We get introduced to the Film Actors Guild, which is Alec Baldwin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the acronym here, is Film Actors Guild. Yeah. Now, so yes, South Park had a whole episode on the word where they argued that the dictionary definition of this word should be acceptably an insult that is more wide-reaching than just people who are gay. And I remember the time when that word was so acceptable. It was so acceptable. It wasn't that long ago that word was very, very accepted. And it was interesting. So at the cusp of that, South Park itself actually kind of argued for making that word even more acceptable. But we've gone in the reverse direction. But yeah, so forever we're going to have to watch this movie where they're making fun of that word as an acronym for the actors who are, kind of the peaceniks. They're against the Iraqi invasion, basically, is really what this is all for. It's
right. And we have Alec Baldwin, who is in the film's universe the greatest actor ever.
Yes,
you can't outact Alec Baldwin.
Yes, he's the yardstick.
Yeah, so he's there with Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon, and
they pick such weird people. So
and Matt Damon, who they just sort of have as this imbecile who just the only thing he can say is Matt Damon.
Yeah. So they go with these again retarded jokes, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that too, because they actually really get into that in their series. But there's an interesting twist to that whole concept that is interesting to talk about when it comes to Matt and Trey. So anyway, we'll get into that. But so yeah, I mean, obviously there's nothing they won't make fun of. There's Liv Tyler, there's George Clooney, of course. But there's, Helen Hunt, which is like, I don't even remember Helen Hunt being, I always thought they went a little far with their celebrity meanness, where I could totally see them making fun of Michael Moore. And there's a reason they made fun of Michael Moore, but even without that reason, I could see making fun of him, right? Because he's so extreme in his take on things, and he's, very bombastic and all that stuff. But like when they made fun of Sally Struthers, who was doing commercials to help save kids in Africa, it was like, come on, what are you doing?
I'm Sally Struthers. These children are in desperate need, and only you can
who's
help.
that fat chick? Sally Struthers, dude. She used to be on Full House. Oh.
Like, what are you really doing here? Right? I feel like there's a little bit of that here. Like, I don't understand why Helen Hunt gets her head blown off. I don't understand, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not even a big Helen Hunt fan. I'm not crazy about her, but I just feel bad that they included her. I just don't understand it.
Yeah. Tim Robbins, on the other hand.
Yeah, that makes a little more sense.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
And then we get to the Hans Blix Hans Blix scene. So we are in King Jong-il's palace, and Hans Blix comes to visit him. And this is an infamous scene. And actually, the ratings board wanted them to drop the scene, but they didn't. So poor Hans Blix, again, I'm sure he's a really good guy.
He certainly seems like he's trying to do good work in the world.
And it's some kind of real shark that they have, a little small shark in a tank. And he gets thrown in the tank and decapitated.
But yes, and so this is a straight James Bond riff of throwing the evil villain, throwing one of his henchmen or one of his enemies into the shark tank.
Yeah, it makes sense in the context of the movie, but it's pretty rough. I remember laughing very hard, and I'm laughing less this time. Like maybe I've grown up a little bit, but I do remember laughing really hard at that. At the time.
I'm thinking maybe I haven't grown up that much because I still found it funny. I mean, it is. Look, this is part of the point of doing it all with puppetry is that you can get away with all kinds of things that you can't normally get away with. It's sort of. Yeah. Like in zombie shows like The Walking Dead, they're like, oh, we do horrible things, but they're just zombies. But they're still upsetting because a zombie is a person. This is another, couple levels removed. Like, oh, they're just puppets. So the puppet got eaten by a shark, but it's a puppet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And then that's pretty quickly followed by the puppet sex scene. Now,
yes.
So we have Lisa and Gary end up, he first of all, I thought it was very strange that they have this backstory where when he was a kid, he fell into a gorilla cage at the zoo.
Yes.
And his brother had to jump in and save him, and his brother got killed by the gorillas. It almost feels like they wanted to film that and they couldn't figure out the logistics, or it didn't turn out right or something. That's my guess, because it's a really bizarre tableau.
Right. So it's very specific. Not just that the brother jumped in to save him and got beaten by the gorillas, but his brother jumped in to save him and forgot that he had a pocket full of blueberries. Yeah. And the gorillas smelled the blueberries and started throwing him back and forth and, killed him in the course of trying to eat the blueberries. It's very, very specific.
It's not really that funny, really. And I mean, unless you saw the actual version that they tried to do, which would probably be pretty funny to have puppet gorillas. So, but in any case, of course, it warms Lisa up to him. But she does say, I can't fall back in love. I just was in love with somebody and he died in my arms and blah, blah, blah. And so he's finally like, well, what do I have to do? And she says, promise me you'll never die and I'll sleep with you tonight. And he says, I'll never die.
Yeah. Well, first he says, I can't do that. He says, yes, but I'll only sleep with you if you promise. He says, I promise I will never die.
I will never die.
I promise I will never die.
And so they have a very, relatively lengthy puppet sex scene, which includes a whole variety of puppet positions. Now, what they cut out.
Yes, the uncut version.
The uncut version. I haven't seen the uncut version. Have you seen the?
I've seen the uncut version. Yes.
So is it true that there's bodily functions as far as they say water sports?
They have that. There's a coprophilia.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, and that
there's coprophilia in the uncut version. I have to say, this is the point where, even though it's puppets, I could not watch that.
Wow. Wow. Now I do got to watch it now, but yeah. And please, anybody who's related to me, shut this off right now. Now let's just acknowledge that. At this point, the South Park guys are expected. If they don't get threatened with an NC, what is it? Is it NC-18? Is that what it's called?
NC-17.
NC-17. If they don't get threatened with an NC-17, they're doing something wrong, because that's part of their shtick, right? So that they were like, yeah, we know we're going to have to cut this out. Like they knew they were going to have to cut
right.
That
And then
right?
I guess this was released on DVD as the unrated version. It's kind of like they took a soft serve ice cream machine and let it loose in the scene.
Oh, Lord.
It's disturbing.
Oh, Lord. Anything else to report on that? Since you've seen it?
That's really, that's the main thing I remember, because, even the release version is a pretty extreme puppet sex scene. That's the main thing I remember. Or maybe I had left the room at that point. If there was anything worse.
So yeah, let's take a break from the movie right now and start talking about Matt and Trey. And
bring it on.
Let me say, like, first of all, I love them. I think they're brilliant. I think they are some of the, especially Trey. You know, it seems like Trey is really the mastermind behind a lot of this humor. And I don't think there's many people who are funnier humor-wise than him. The gross-out humor doesn't do anything for me. The mean humor doesn't really do anything for me. And so it is like a subset of what they're doing that I adore, right? It's Butters, right? It's Cartman. It's what Cartman is. It's Cartman's character. It's, you know, Osimo.
Greetings. I am the Osimo 4000.
Damn it, will you just do? Who's at the door, Osimo?
3 boys named Stan, Kyle, and Kenny.
Excuse me, sir, but that's not a robot. It's not? No, it clearly has bipedal movement, so the correct term is computerized automatron.
No! No, please! Don't kill him! He's my best friend! He's my best friend in the whole world!
You want to tell me this isn't humanity? Who's to judge what makes something human anyway? Does this make me human?
And it's the episode where Cartman's trying to raise sea monkeys. And he has that song, Sea People and Me. That stuff is magic. It is just magic. What he does with those kids. And I do appreciate his political statements and his sociological statements. I'm a little heterodox, you know, and so I really do appreciate a lot of that. I think he pushes back. He was obviously PC principle. You know, he's been pushing back against like ultra PC culture in a way that I think is pretty healthy. He, you know, like, thrilled that they hate Trump, you know, because I was afraid of that, because God knows, you know, they sometimes flirt with you're a little worried that they're going to get a little too conservative, but so I do appreciate what they do. But so before I launch into their careers, just give me your take on their humor and what they've been doing.
So I'm not nearly as deep into the Matt and Trey world as you are, apparently. I think I am more susceptible to the meme style humor, you know, these kind of like cultural riffs that they like to play on, especially, look, you know, a lot of them are similar kinds of tropes, things that the Simpsons work to good effect. You know, you take these, you know, kind of movie cliches, recycled plot lines, things that have been used over and over again as tropes to kind of like, you know, you can always reliably kind of build a plot or build a character on it, and then just rip it to shreds and do it kind of mercilessly. But then in the end, you need it anyway, because you can't do storytelling without those things. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I kind of enjoy that process of, you know, where you sort of just rip down the artifice, and then in the end you have to shrug and like, but hey, you got to live. So what are you going to do? Yeah. And I feel like that, you know, that's what a lot of their humor is, you know, they rip down the artifice on the left, they rip down the artifice on the right, but ultimately there is a sort of this underlying theme that you can't live with anarchy, and that's and I mean, Team America is kind of about that. It's like the movie is all anarchy, and yet it's also this weird way, almost like very sincere authoritarian movie about like you really do, you know, these people who are, you know, the buffoons and the villains, and you're laughing at them, and they're ridiculous, but you actually need them. It's a weird double-edged message, which, you know, I'm not always on board with that, but I love the way that they will go after everything, and you can always find, you know, that ripping down process is always so entertaining.
Yeah, they've said that, like, people see the South Park characters backwards, where they think they're sort of looking at the kids and saying, oh, look at how kids see right through the bullshit. But actually they said, no, what we're really saying is that we're trying to always give the kids the lesson that society is good for them. Kids instinctually want to kill each other. And I think that's true. You know, like I do, I'm a pessimist. I do feel like humans, their natural inclination is war, you know, I feel like we've discussed this actually on my other podcast where we're talking about chimpanzees. I mean, you know, our closest relatives, they tear their faces off of each other. I think that is more, you have to fight against the drive to be selfish and to harm the others. I think that you have to actually decide to be a good person, And that's a little more where they're actually coming from, is you do need society to sort of hold everything in place and to, have order instead of chaos. And they say people really do get that message wrong with them. So,
well, yeah, if I could be anthropological again for a moment, if you go back, about 50,000 years, when there were like modern humans and Neanderthals coexisting in Europe, the total population of Neanderthals was maybe about 10,000. The total world population of modern Homo sapiens was maybe about 20,000. Like, this is everything. This is the entire world population, was about 20,000 individuals. And they were mostly in groups of, a few dozen to maybe at most a couple hundred, who would kind of wander around. And that, they each kind of lived, that was their own world. There are many ideas of why the modern Homo sapiens kind of, outcompeted the Neanderthals, but one of the differences seems to be that the modern humans were able to start sticking together into larger groups. They were able to develop and maintain larger social hierarchies and these kind of cohesive things. And you think, like, today, my God, I'm in New York City. There are 9 million people who are living here, and on the whole, they're not killing each other. That's kind of amazing when you consider that we started from this thing where being able to stick together in a group of, a few dozen and not kill each other was a big achievement beyond, chimpanzees, where it's like a dozen or a half dozen who stick together without killing each other. The fact that we've gotten this far, to me, is amazing. Yeah. And so, we're not all there yet, but we're working on it. We're making progress.
Yeah. We need to figure it out. We need to use our brains and figure out how to do it.
Yeah, well, and that's, we're under a lot of pressure because with this, the population growth, we were able to make a fairly direct leap to 1 million, to 10 million. Then we made it to 1 billion. Now we made it to almost 10 billion.
And now we're going to cure malaria. So welcome aboard, millions and millions and millions of more people who are not going to die, because we're eliminating all of nature's little tricks to keep our population down, for our own good.
On the other hand, we're having fewer and fewer kids.
So, yeah. And then the other point I want to make, actually, before we start, is the difference between destructive humor and constructive humor. I think comedy is essential. Just like all the arts are an excellent vehicle for changing society, right? And I think you have to give Hollywood some credit, actually, in breaking down some barriers, as far as, really trying to break down racial barriers and all of that stuff. Hollywood does at some points kind of get its shit together and say, you know what, we got to stop doing this and we got to start doing this. Movies have been very influential in a positive way, and comedy is its own animal within the arts, and obviously literature. I'm talking about everything, literature and everything else. But comedy is an amazing vehicle for change. It's an amazing, because you enjoy it. You're laughing. You don't even realize it's hitting you. Some of the most important statements in the history of the arts came from comedians, and some of the most, groundbreaking and breaking down real walls. It came out of comedy. At the same time, again, I've been looking at a lot of movies from the 70s and 80s, and the, the way they treat women and this rape jokes are just like unbelievable. We had blackface was, obviously just very mainstream. There was obviously a lot of negative that contributes negatively to society. So the point is, you have to separate out the constructive, where comedy is like incredibly useful, and the negative. And so, you look at something like Archie Bunker, which is what Trey and Matt were kind of emulating when they came up with Cartman. And you say, was he destructive or was he constructive? And people can argue either way. I would argue that he was constructive, because they were making fun of him. They were really pointing very clearly to what a jerk he was, even though there was an affectionate side, and, his daughter loved him, his wife loved him, and, you had sympathy for him. But still, to me, the overarching message was, this guy's a jerk, and he's a dinosaur, and thank God Gloria's generation is taking over, that kind of thing.
Okay, so I have to hear, are Matt and Trey a constructive force in the world? What do you think?
I think it's very mixed. Yeah. So, but I think that the constructive stuff outweighs the destructive. Their destructive stuff is, like we were talking last episode about David Letterman being mean. There's a meanness in comedy. Again, like, making fun of Sally Struthers, like, that's just mean. It's just, there's nothing there. There's nothing, you're not accomplishing anything. But making fun of Hollywood is constructive. It is constructive to make fun of Hollywood when they think they're powerful and they're getting into politics. I think that's good to take the wind out of that sail. But to get really specific, we have Token, right? There's a character called Token.
Token, how many times do we have to go through this? You're black, you can play bass.
I'm getting sick of your stereotypes.
Be as sick as you want, just give me a goddamn bass line.
God damn it.
Which interestingly, at the same time, Strangers with Candy had Principal Blackman. Those kind of came out at the same time. And that's really interesting. Now, so what do you think of Token? Like, what do you do you think that was constructive or destructive?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It's a tough one.
Yeah. I think on the whole constructive in the sense that, look, a comedy takes on different things to different audiences. Matt and Trey in particular, I think designed comedy to play with a double edge. Like if you're a liberal, you're offended this way. If you're conservative, you're offended that way, because you're bringing these sort of different meanings and readings to the characters. Yeah. And so, I think, if you're trying to sort of come up with a net balance, good or bad, I think you have to think about how it's playing to the different viewers and the different audiences looking at it. I think on the whole, making people aware of tokenism and of things that are there for the kind of the appearance of being fair and inclusive, but it's absolutely and completely just a bullshit smokescreen. I think making people aware of that, I think on the whole, is a net plus.
So he came out in like 1998 is basically when they named him Token. I think it is very constructive because I think it does point out that it was so often, it was, the black character was really, truly a token character. At that time, you'd see one black person, always one. And I'm always like, why don't you have two? Just two, just to break that little barrier where you have to have one black person. So I do think that he is constructive. At this point, of course, they're stuck with it. And, it's maybe a little past it's, what you could do with it. But I think it was a point worth making, and Principal Blackman, too. I thought that was, you understand why that's funny because, this is our black character. Look at our black character. Look at us. We have a black character. Right. Now, they did Muhammad, of course. They actually showed Muhammad. I think that was extremely constructive. That is very debatable. I understand why people would think that was not a good thing. People who are Muslim, so that's, again, it's these are all difficult questions. I'm not saying these are easy. They have used the N-word in South Park. If you dig now, the most famous one being Randy being in Wheel of Fortune, so the whole episode's about that. And it's a really wonderful episode. And I think that's the episode where Token and Stan are kind of debating this, like, you don't really understand how difficult that is for us, for me being black. And by the end of the episode, he says, you know what, you're right. I don't understand. I will never understand.
Token, I get it now. I don't get it. I've been trying to say that I understand how you feel, but I'll never understand. I'll never really get how it feels for a black person to have somebody use the N-word. I don't get it.
Now you get it, Stan.
They put really good use to some of this stuff, but you will see the N-word. And I always wonder if they're going to have their day, where they get really called out on this stuff. And then, like I said, they had defended the F for gay word.
We aren't talking about gay people.
You just admitted to spray painting that they should get out of town.
Just because a person is gay doesn't mean he's a
So we just have to convince the dictionary people to change the definition.
Making the word officially refer to annoying, inconsiderate Harley riders.
Cartman had a character called the Coon. He was a raccoon. He was a raccoon superhero called the Coon. That was many episodes. So anyway, but then they had Chef. Chef was this amazing, wonderful mainstream black. He was clearly not a token character, right? All right. So the history of Trey and Matt. So of course, as we said, they started out doing they did a couple of little cartoons that went viral. They were doing these cartoons when they were in college. The two of them met in 1992 at the University of Colorado Boulder. And one of the first things they did together was Cannibal, the musical. Have you seen that?
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. I've read a lot about it.
It was a student film, and it's a pretty amazing student film. It's a full musical. The songs are great.
The sky is blue and all the leaves are green. The sun's as warm as a baked potato.
There's dance sequences. And it takes place in the Old West. It's about Alfred Packer, who is accused of cannibalizing the people he went on an expedition with to find gold mining. As they're star is rising, and they're as you said, the little cartoon they did about Santa and Jesus went viral, and they started creating a buzz. And so they got the funding together for a film that Trey wrote called Orgasmo, 1997, and it's really good. It's a really good film about a Mormon who is sent to LA to convert people and who gets accidentally kind of sucked into the porn business. He's offered $20,000 to be in a porn movie. They have a substitute person for the actual sex scenes. You know, one of the things you see in both of these movies, Cannibal and Orgasmo, is Trey Parker really gets poignancy. He gets heart. He gets like you loving these characters. You really like they're very sweet characters within often a framework of cannibalism or porn or whatever kind of horrific thing he can come up with. And then 1997 is the year South Park began. So South Park, of course, was what made Comedy Central. They were like nobodies. They were absolutely nobodies. And then very shortly, within a few years, they did Bigger, Longer, Uncut. What's your take on that?
I loved it.
It's the best, isn't it? It's just, it's perfect. It's just amazing. Yeah. Every song is just like absolute perfection. It is just out of a Broadway play. And I know they were parodying Broadway plays, but they still nailed it so hard.
The sun is shining and the grass is green under the 3 feet of snow, I mean. This is a day when it's hard to wear a frown. All the happy people stop to say hello.
Get out of my way.
Even though the temperature's low. It's a perfect Sunday morning in my quiet little mountain town.
And Team America has a lot of these like sappy Michael McDonald type songs, you know, and they even have Michael McDonald singing one of these songs. But when the devil is singing about being in love, you know, with Saddam Hussein. And it's so funny. It's so funny, but it's also just an amazing love song. It's just amazing. Kyle's Mama is a Bitch is my favorite. Out of every South Park song, that little sequence actually includes blackface. It actually includes blackface. Yes.
Okay.
It shows at one point Cartman's like, all the children of the world singing of a da da da, and he has the little Dutch kid singing Kyle's Mama's a Bitch, Chinese kids singing Kyle's Mama's a Bitch, and then he's in Africa. And it's African people singing this, and Cartman's back is to us, and when he turns around, he's in fucking blackface. I think it works. I think it works.
Better than Ted Danson?
Tina Fey did a lot of blackface, man. What's up with that? Tina Fey did a lot of race jokes. It's a little weird almost.
I mean, you're making me remember like how much, you know, I mean, blackface was still a mainstream thing into the 80s.
Now, again, it's interesting because when are they making fun of people wearing blackface? So I would argue that in the South Park version, you would not see Kyle wearing blackface. You would not see Stan wearing blackface. You might see Butters only because Eric Cartman convinced him to wear it because he thought he was doing something good. But Eric Cartman's the only character, and you know he's wearing it because he's a racist jerk, you know, and so it makes sense. So I think in some of those cases, like 30 Rock had a bunch of blackface scenes that they removed those episodes. And so, I mean, I'm sure that they were making fun of the concept of people being stupid enough to wear blackface. I'm sure that's what they were doing. But I don't know, 30 Rock, someone did a video about Tina Fey. She did so many race jokes in 30 Rock that you were almost like, wait a minute, like what's going on here? Like it was a little bit much. Another thing they make fun of a lot in South Park is people who have developmental disabilities. Well, also physical disabilities, but you know, there's actually a very beloved character, Timmy. He's wonderful. Timmy. And he's obviously sort of developmentally disabled as well as physically disabled. But they also have kids who are mean and you know, like mafia figures in these things. It's pretty interesting. In 1999, they produced a thing called How's Your News for MTV, which was developmentally disabled people and people with very severe handicaps doing the news.
Never seen a news show like this before.
Woo! Here comes How's Your News.
We're gonna tear this place apart.
We all met at a summer camp for people with disabilities. Now we're traveling across America to bring you the stories like no one else can.
Now the truth comes out.
I have Star Magazine and I've seen your picture in it.
Well, it's in there quite a bit.
Showing the beauty of it and how great they were doing these kinds of things.
I didn't even know about that. Did it And was it one-off? Did it not get picked up?
It was one season. It was like 6 episodes, and it was only one season, but it was really good. It's really good. So you can look for chunks of that on YouTube. Definitely worth looking up. It's really nice. Really good. They did That's My Bush. Do you remember that?
I'd forgotten about that, yes.
He's the president in residence. He's kind of in charge. He's got the whole country saying, that's my Bush.
Now that's interesting because last episode we talked about Get a Life. All right. So you are the person I went to see Chris Elliott talk with the first time I went to see Cabin Boy. That was early on when Chris Elliott was like, you people actually like this movie. You went with me. You're a big Chris Elliott fan.
I'm a big Chris Elliott fan and more Get a Life fan. Cabin Boy opened on my birthday, whatever year that was, or that was opening weekend. And I made all of my friends go to see Cabin Boy with me as my birthday present, as my birthday parties. We all went to see Cabin Boy because I was a huge Get a Life fan. And it was opening weekend. And this is in New York City. And we were almost the only people in the theater. Yeah. It was amazing. That movie just like repelled everyone. And yeah, I can't say that I really enjoyed the movie, but there was a sense of seeing something just like insane that it got made.
Yeah.
Whereas with Get a Life, to me, Get a Life, it holds up. Like the absurdist madness of the thing really does hold up and still is very funny, especially in the second season when they sensed that at any moment they might get canceled. And so they just started having Chris be killed at the end of every episode. They're like, if this is the last one, it just ends with him dying.
I put a clip in of the last episode of this video cast of the alien. I don't remember that at all. They had
the Spewy episode. Spewy. Oh my God, Spewy is one of my all-time favorites. And Spewy,
I was like, how do I miss that?
It's very much in the spirit of Team America. This thing of like, taking the the sort of like the beloved trope and not just parodying it, but like ripping apart so mercilessly and brutally that you're like, stop! It's already dead. Yes, why are you still going?
Oh, he's trying to make contact with me. Oh, think of all that he can teach us, all the wisdom he can share. This is a wonderful new beginning for mankind. Here's my
Yeah. Spew does a lot of spewing, much like Gary in this movie, who there's a vomit scene that goes on and on and on. And Spewy was doing that in Get a Life. Now there's a lot of connective tissue here. And
it's all that theory of comedy to such excess that it becomes funny again.
Yeah.
That if he throws up for 5 seconds, it's funny. For 15 seconds, it's uncomfortable. For a full minute, it's funny again.
Yeah. Well, That's My Bush is very good. And it's so connected to Get a Life. It's really the same thing, except for the family is the president's, it's the Bush family. But it's the exact same concept where we're hitting you really hard with just the sitcom cliche. The entire point, it's not even about George Bush because he's not even himself. Really, he's just a neutral character. He has a neighbor that's kind of like Larry from Three's Company. Marsha Wallace plays the crazy wacky maid who is always wisecracking and has all kinds of advice for them. And it's sort of funny because it's like they placed the idea of Get a Life into the White House. And it's really exactly that. I don't know if anyone's ever asked Trey about that, but it's almost like he has to give a nod to Chris Elliott because that's exactly what he was doing. It was the exact same concept. But I think he does it a little better only because he's a little bit sharper with the humor and because he'd been writing South Park for years at that point. It's quite funny. I think it's quite funny. It was a very short-lived comedy on Comedy Central. It went from like winter to August. It got canceled right before September 11th, 2001, like right before the actual 9/11 happened. And they're like, it would have gotten canceled anyway because it wasn't sustainable after that happened. But that's really where you would love it. You have to look up That's My Bush. You will love it. So then Team America 2004, And then just one little quickie is Sassy Justice, which was like a one-off where they make fun of Donald Trump. They use deep fake with Peter Serafinowicz. Peter Serafinowicz, who's the one who did Look Around You. He's the British.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the British.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yes.
So he had been doing like a lot of.
I love Look Around You.
Yeah. So he had been doing a lot of Twitter. He would take Trump video clips and dub them with a very gay dialogue, to make him sound sassy Trump. And so they took that and made a video thing called Sassy Justice, which is worth looking up. They deep faked Trump's face. Look it up. It's worth seeing. But so that's the whole career of Trey Parker and Matt Stone, with the exception of course, Book of Mormon.
I believe that God has a plan for all of us. I believe that plan involves me getting my own planet.
Which was, oh my God. So at this point, Trey Parker has to be a billionaire with a B, right? I mean, come on.
It's worth a lot of coin.
So that I was lucky enough to see in previews. I paid like $75 to see it. I was very lucky because it was then $500, very quickly. You had seen it, right?
I have seen it. I'm not as big a fan as you are, apparently.
Yeah. You saw it with a later cast though.
I did. I saw it when the prices started to come down again after the wave passed, and that may have made a difference. You probably saw it at a time when people didn't know what they were getting in for. There's a certain process that happens when you see a kind of a well-oiled Broadway play later in its run, where everybody knows what's happening and where they're supposed to laugh, and they start laughing at jokes before they come, and the whole thing feels very programmed. So that may have colored the reaction that I had, that it felt kind of potted.
Yeah. No, I was very lucky because I didn't know what to expect. It hadn't been reviewed yet, as far as I remember. So it was a total surprise. And and it was Josh Gad and Andrew Reynolds, who were just amazing. So that is now being made into a movie. The culture has changed already. That came out in 2011. Bad stuff was happening in Africa and is happening in parts of Africa. And they highlight that and they contrast it, obviously, with these innocent Mormons. That's the whole point of it. But it'll be really interesting to see what they change, because I think they're going to have to. I know Josh Gad has said they're probably going to change a lot in it. Trey Parker, he's got to be a billionaire, because he sold the entire South Park series to HBO for $500 million.
Wait, can we ask him for funding?
Trey Parker, join my Patreon, please. Join my Patreon.
Yeah, I mean, a $10,000 check would mean nothing to him. Nothing.
No, really. Again, he sold South Park to HBO for $500 million cold. I mean, those were just done episodes, and he'd already sold it to Hulu. He had already sold it several times, to other. And then the Book of Mormon was just making $500 a ticket. I mean, it's just, you can. And then he's making this movie. It's probably going to do well. I bet he's going to do a good job with it. And yeah.
Now, and before we move on, I just have to make another connection, which is this Mormon theme, which connects to another favorite show of mine, which has nothing to do with this, nothing to do with comedy, but very much to do with science fiction. I'm a big fan of The Expanse. And The Expanse has a whole plot in which there is this giant spaceship being built in the asteroid belt by the Mormons. They've found an Earth-like planet, and they want to go there and create a Mormon colony. And so they've sort of pooled all their money, and they're building this interstellar spaceship. And it's the biggest spaceship in the solar system, because it's like all the Mormons have pooled their money to make the world's first interstellar ship. And the first interstellar journey is going to be a Mormon pilgrimage to another world.
Wow.
It's kind of like crazy throwaway plot line in the show.
And is it supposed to be sort of funny, or?
It's sort of funny, and but it's also sort of played for cultural commentary, that you have these sort of hard scrabble miners who work in the asteroid belt, and then the clean cut Mormons come in, and it's very much in the spirit of the Mormons going to Africa. It's the Mormons are going to the asteroid belt with all these poor hard scrabble working class rock chippers, and they're passing out money like, here, I need you to build me a really big rocket ship.
Wow.
We've diverged a little bit from Team America, but it's fun to make these connections.
So back to the movie. We'll just whip through the rest of this movie. I forgot to mention that the Sphinx was decapitated.
And they blew up the pyramids.
They blew up the pyramids. Michael Moore's in this. Now, they make fun of him. There's a reason they make fun of Michael Moore. Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 came out the same year. and I don't blame them for ripping on him. They explode him in the end. He gets completely, they have him like he has this disgusting dirty shirt on. They totally tear him apart. But he had interviewed Matt Stone for Bowling for Columbine. That's what it was, Bowling for Columbine. Because Matt Stone came from the same town that Columbine was in, forgetting the name of the small town in Colorado. And he interviewed him, and then he put in the film a cartoon that looks quite a bit like the South Park style, but it's not. And he really clearly was trying to trick the audience into thinking that they made this film for him and that they were like participating much more in the movie than they actually were. It really was sneaky. I was surprised Michael Moore would do that, actually. But so they really let him have it in this movie. Understandably,
right. They don't just blow him up. They make him into a terrorist bomber who shows up with a dynamite vest because he thinks the military is evil, and so he shows up at the military headquarters in the the secret lair in Mount Rushmore in his dynamite vest to blow it up and kill everybody. He's a suicide bomber.
Yeah. So the whole team there, kind of lured by Kim Jong-il to a location, and they all get taken down one by one by these North Korean fighters. The empath says, "I sense I'm going down," as she's crashing into the water. And then when that's all done and they get captured, they're put in little jails in his basement, all that stuff. We have the song "I'm So." Now, am I going to say this right? Ronry.
I'm so Ronry.
I'm sorry, but I'm just reading what it's called.
I'm so lonely, so lonely, so lonely inside real Rome.
Everything that's out of his mouth, their L's and the R's are, completely. Yeah, how they do that. So it's a wonderful song, though. It is, right? It's a good song.
But yeah, I mean the idea. I mean, leaving aside the accent humor, the idea that of Kim Jong-il all alone in his palace, he kind of wants to blow up the world, but he also feels like nobody loves me.
Nobody understands me.
Nobody understands me. Why can't I have a friend? Why can't people see who I am? And
right.
It's like, maybe it's possible. Yeah.
So he was a narcissist, obviously. So, it's like nobody can understand how my brain works and all this stuff. Oh yeah. So then we get to Gary in the bar, and he's like drowning his sorrows, and he's decided to leave the mission. We have this vomit scene that's just, what you'd expect Matt and Trey to do. Puppet vomit. Lots of puppet vomit. So the thing that turns him around is another song that's has him thinking about Lisa. Well, it's a song where he refers to the movie Pearl Harbor, and
we're now deep in Michael Bay territory.
Yeah. I miss you almost as much as I hate the movie Pearl Harbor. That's kind of the gist of it. So the kids have all been kidnapped. Spotswood, then that's when Michael Moore blows up Spotswood. Michael Moore destroys their headquarters. And Gary just has a change of heart after this song and shows up. And here the blowjob jokes come full circle.
Yeah. I mean, this is part of the mad genius, or maybe just the madness of Matt and Trey, is that they play this scene in a way as a real dramatic scene. That Gary has abandoned the team has been captured. Spotswood is injured from this explosion that destroyed the base. Like everything is in ruins. How are they going to regroup? And how can Spotswood ever trust this guy who turned his back on them and then everything fell apart? How are they going to rebuild trust? And the key to rebuilding trust turns out to be, of course, a blowjob.
Yeah, because at the beginning, when he first met Spotswood, he thought, "Oh, you're one of these Hollywood types who just wants me to give you a blowjob, and then you're going to give me like an acting job." And he was like, "No, trust me, I'm not one of those people." It's so contrived, but somehow Trey Parker was able to take this sort of, "No, I'm not a Hollywood horrible person who wants you to give me a blowjob," and turns it completely around so that this is how they establish that he's part of the team.
It's not about sex. It's not about sex, Gary. This is about trust. We got to pass through the eye of the needle.
What will that prove?
It will prove that you are truly ready to lay everything on the line, to throw away all your inhibitions and give 100%. We must go back to that first night we met, that first issue of Trust, don't you see?
So I don't find all of that very funny, but I understand why people find that funny. I understand. I know Trey just thought that was the funniest joke. I bet he thought that was the funniest joke in the whole movie. It's like, again, it's juvenile, it's juvenile humor. I have childlike humor. I love kitty ripoffs and I love stuff that goes back to childhood, but I was never, just never did anything.
Mr. Show did a lot of humor like that also.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think you'll find that it far exceeds any of your other offers.
Dan, as a member of this firm, you'll be one of the elite. A life of privilege will be yours.
Dan, we would like you to give us a blowjob.
We would be very proud to have you give us a blowjob.
You are our man.
A blowjob?
So then we have the montage song. Now the montage song, came from that was already used in a South Park episode, one of the best South Park episodes, where Kyle and Stan's parents, all the parents, they get suckered into going to a ski weekend vacation, but all they have to do is sit through a couple of talks about timeshare apartments. And so, of course, that gets blown up, where they just they can't get out of these timeshare apartment talks. And it becomes, that in itself becomes a joke. So, but then the secondary story is the kids skiing, learning to ski. And they parody perfectly the kind of teenage movie where it's like, hey, are you flirting with my girlfriend? Well, I'm going to have to beat you up. You know what? We'll have a competition. We'll have a downhill skiing competition. We'll see who's the cool guy here. And Stan's just continuing like, I don't care, dude. I don't know who you are. Like, why are you even talking to me? But of course, he gets roped into this big skiing competition with this teenage jerk.
7-time World Aspen champion Tad Mikowski versus 8-year-old Stan Marsh. You're going down, little boy.
Yeah, probably.
And he has to train, and that's where the montage song comes from. So, I mean, for me, that was like a little, I'd seen it, I'd already seen it. But if you hadn't seen it, it's a great, it's brilliant.
Right.
It's
I hadn't seen that episode. So when I saw it in Team America, I was seeing it fresh. And the idea of making a song about the montage of, the hero training and getting ready for the big event. It's another one of those perfect little pinprick to the cliche things that Matt and Trey do so well.
That's when you need to push yourself to the test and show us a passage of time. We're gonna need a montage. Ooh, it takes a montage.
Yeah, no, it was worth bringing back. And then we have Team America escapes their cells. Alec Baldwin puts on this finale show at they have this pageant, this show for all these foreign dignitaries. Kim has in his office the weapons of mass destruction on his board that he's about to set off weapons of mass destruction all over the world. Of course, he sets a 5-minute counter because why not? So, the Team America battling against the celebrities who are trying to stop them from stopping Kim Jong-il. And they just blow the heads off of all the celebrities. And that's part of the fun, of course. Slicing Helen Hunt in half, blowing Janine Garofalo's, that puppet head being blown off is quite impressive, actually. They have Susan Sarandon just...
Well, so the thing with Susan Sarandon, this is, to me, I love the ongoing joke about like the great Hollywood actors. You can't out-act me. And so they have this thing where Susan Sarandon pretends that she's been tied up by the evil Kim Jong-il, and she's really on the side of Team America. And and Gary looks at us, she's acting.
Here, let me loose. I'll show you where the theater is. All right. No, Chris, stay away from her. She's acting. I am not. The others tied me up because I wouldn't go along with their plans. Your skills are fading with age, Miss Sarandon.
You shall die a peasant's death!
It's that whole thing where acting is, again, such a magical, important thing that only very few people are able to do. I do love that. I never get sick of that joke because I do think, I hate to say it, but I don't think it's that, I don't know if I could act. I've never acted, But I do feel like, there's a few good actors, but most of these people, come on. I mean, it can't be that hard. It just can't be that hard. I'm sorry. Apologies to all my acting friends. So Susan Sarandon is obliterated. She goes flying off of a balcony. And one of my favorite scenes now here is the Panther scene. The empath and the guy who has a crush on the empath. I can't remember his name. They get locked into a room, and Tim Robbins, I think, and maybe Sean Penn release the Panthers to eat them alive. And of course, it's a couple of black cats, and it's so brilliant. It's so brilliant. I love it. So the way they kind of wrap this up is Alec Baldwin is giving this speech to these dignitaries. Gary is supposed to outact Alec Baldwin, and the conceit is that to convince these people that we should be doing something to stop Kim Jong-il instead of just trying to peacefully let him do what he wants to do. And Gary gets on stage, like, Gary, act like you've never acted before, like, do your thing. And so the speech, which you were quoting to me right before we started taping, you haven't memorized, apparently.
Again, my older brother, John, the same one who threw a lot of idiot humor at me as a child, was a big fan of this movie and would frequently quote or at least the gist of the big speech, that there are 3 types of people in the world. There are dicks, there are pussies, and there are assholes. Now, pussies don't like dicks because pussies get fucked by dicks. But dicks can also fuck assholes. And if you don't fuck assholes, then we're all just going to get covered with shit.
And you know what? Ultimately, it makes sense. Like, what's funny about it is it actually makes sense. Like, there's actually some logic to it. There really is. If you think
some
about
pussies get so full of shit, they start to act like assholes, but they're still just pussies. They work it so hard, and they work the metaphor so hard and break such a sweat making it work, and present it all in this, like, if you can just act well enough, everybody will be like, you can't outact me. I'm Alec Baldwin. Nobody outacts me.
Yeah. And he wins them over. He acts his heart out with this speech. They actually gotten that speech from a guy in the bar from earlier, right before he threw up. Some drunken guy had given him those words. So it's just kind of cute.
I just have to I have to throw in this is one of my favorite stories from The Onion. It gets exactly to what you were talking about. It's a fake interview with Ed Harris on what it's like to be an actor. I'm just gonna read it because I love this. I think about this a lot when I'm watching, especially watching bad movies. But when you're watching a movie and all of a sudden you just become very aware that you're seeing a bunch of people prancing around in front of a camera, and you no longer feel like you're watching a movie. And so this is his fake interview as written in The Onion. He says, I don't know. I guess there's just something really goofy about being like, hello, my name is Frank and I'm a cop or whatever. But that's not who I am at all, said Harris, adding that it's especially weird doing this on the set of a movie because the whole thing is make-believe, but everyone has to act like it's real. Sometimes they give me a little hat or something to wear, or I'm supposed to speak with a funny accent. I feel especially silly because it's like, why am I wearing this hat and talking this funny voice? This is so weird and dumb, you know? I just love that.
It's great.
It's like, yeah, that kind of is what acting is.
Yes. No offense, our acting friends. I know we have friends who are actors. I know it. They work hard. They work hard.
I know there are all the people who say, oh, you're a writer? I'm thinking about writing. And you're like, it's a lot harder than you think it is. I'm sure it's true with acting too.
Yeah. Cartooning.
Yep.
Shout out to Joe.
I've got an idea for a cartoon.
And so, needless to say, in the end, they stop all of this. Kim Jong-il falls to his death onto the spike of a German guy's helmet. So the weird thing in the end is after Kim Jong-il dies, is a out of his mouth comes a cockroach, a real cockroach. They used a real giant African cockroach or something. It comes crawling out of his mouth and walks into a rocket ship and takes off into space. And one of the closing songs as the credits are rolling is Kim Jong-il singing about how he's a space alien. So really that's the real ending. You almost don't notice it, but the real ending is that Kim Jong-il has been a space alien all along. So I like that. Not a bad touch.
It explains why he feels so lonely.
Yes.
He's an alien among humans.
That's right. So that's Team America. I mean, it's not a laugh riot, but it's quite.
Some might say that it is, but
Yeah. It's it's kind of like Cabin Boy. It was a really difficult movie to make. Obviously, watching it again recently, did you find it offensive or what?
I think. I mean, it is so much what it is. If you've seen it before, or if you've seen really anything that they've done, you're not going to be shocked by anything in there. Even the stuff that is kind of shocking as you're watching it, like you're not shocked that they're doing it. The only way I could really answer that question is like trying to step completely outside of myself and my identity. Like, if I were not like the white dude watching the movie made by the white dudes making fun of these things, how would I react to it? And probably very differently than I react to it. But I feel like there is such an anarchic spirit to it, and so much of this tear the whole thing down spirit. The thing that does strike me is just how much the movie kind of imperceptibly carries you along from the beginning, where the military, they're just like the absolute villains. They're just these crass, ignorant, destructive, bullying Americans who just come in and ruin everything they touch. And by the end, you kind of, Matt and Trey have sort of pulled you into this idea of like, oh no, we actually need these people. These people really are our protectors. And it's a very, it's a sneaky and sort of reactionary message in the movie. And that does strike me every time I see this is sort of how much this movie that purports to be counterculture is a deeply conservative movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's the thing, is if you scratch the surface, you find a lot of conservatism in their stuff. Again, it's kind of the way to deliver these messages that people bristle to. And, I do think that there is a culture right now of people just not being able to listen to the other side. Obviously, we tend to be in liberal circles. We're liberal New Yorker, Park Slope, kind of friends, and yeah, I find it really refreshing. Obviously I hate Trump. I'm sorry if, for people who are Trump fans, but I really, really detest him. But they feel like comforting to me, knowing that Trey and Matt are kind of taking this stance that nobody else in their circles are. I just feel like there's some security that there's this sane voice out there kind of pushing back on a lot of this, like, again, PC principle and, some of the stuff that they push back on. It's because they're doing it with comedy, and they're doing it in a way that is very even-handed, always very even-handed, that they can really get away with this stuff. And I really admire Trey Parker. I got to say, I really do admire him. I've always had a crush on him. Let me tell you, I've always had a crush on Trey Parker. All right, let's do.
All right, I just want to say one more thing about the pussies, dicks, and assholes theme of the thing. Back to that question of, sort of being an equal opportunity offender. Right now we're in the middle of all this, all this language about cancel culture. Has cancel culture gone too far? What is cancel culture anyway? I feel like so much of the things that people are calling cancel culture is basically boils down to don't be an asshole. It used to be like, oh, if you're a racist jerk, or if you're a sexist, or if you, mouth off against the boss or do all these different things, you're being an asshole and you can get fired for it. And, so much of that, now gets elevated as, oh, it's cancel culture. When, the basic principle of be decent to other human beings is just kind of like, the idea that you can be canceled for not being a decent human being is not really a particularly outrageous idea. And so, so underneath this kind of, multi-layered, possibly reactionary, anarchic message of Team America, I feel like there is a very common sense theme of, don't be an asshole. Yeah. If you're an asshole, you're bringing bad things into the world, and everyone else kind of has to step up and stop you from being an asshole. And I'm on board with that.
I'm going to push back a little bit. I think there is.
I know you are. You and I agree on this.
I think there's a little bit.
I want to hear your reaction.
No, I do think there's a bit of cancel culture, and I'm just going to pull out my South Park example of when they covered this pretty recently, actually, on a recent episode. So Randy just decided, Columbus Day was evil. Obviously, there's reasons to not be crazy about Columbus Day. But he gets on a phone campaign and he's calling everybody who lives in Columbus, Ohio, and going, "Hey, do you live in Columbus, Ohio? You're a racist jerk."
Hello, is this Howard Peterson? You live in Columbus, Ohio, is that correct? Yeah, you racist piece of shit. You heard me. You're an intolerant pig. Oh, you're not? You just choose to live in a city named for ethnic cleansing? No, fuck you. Rename your city, asshole. Hello? Okay, next one. Come on, get calling, Stan.
And I thought that was so freaking funny. So anyway, I do think a little bit of that has been going on. I do. I really do.
Yes.
I think people have gone a little overboard. I mean, people are getting fired. Someone used a Chinese word that sounded like the N-word, but they literally were using a Chinese word. I don't know if he got fired, but he got suspended for it. And I think that that's been happening. And we are getting to this point where it's getting a little bit too much. Again, that episode goes on both sides. It hits both sides, as legit. And I have to say, I think Cartman is one of the most brilliant characters ever to be created. He is a true sociopath. I mean, he's really a psychopath more than a sociopath. And cold-blooded psychopath. It is just a beautifully drawn, and I don't mean drawn, but beautifully fleshed out character that is so funny. And it's so exactly how you do it when you're trying to show the bad side of things. The other kids hate him, but at the same time, they tolerate him because they're, by inertia, they've just grown up with this kid. They have the same interests and they all hang out. And I sort of think that's beautiful in itself, that Kyle and Stan just kind of put up with this sociopath that they're friends with because, he doesn't have any other friends and they like to do the same things. And I don't know, there's something really kind of moving about all of that. And even, and I love Butters, and Butters being so naive and getting sucked into everything that Cartman does. And, I think it's a beautiful thing that they've put together. I haven't been crazy about the last few seasons. I have to say, I hate to be like that because that's just so classic. But
they've been doing this for a long time. I mean, that's sustaining a creative run like that when most shows burn out after 3 or 4 seasons of creativity. I mean, that's a hard run to maintain.
It's incredible. So towards the end of every episode, as we have finished talking about the movie, we have a little what's it called? What do you call it? I don't know. I'm fried now.
It's an aperitif. It's the amuse bouche comes before. What comes after?
Something that was sweet that comes after a large meal to make everything taste pleasant. Comedy Coda is what it's called. Comedy Coda. And so what we do is we look at something that's not a film, but is comedy, but is anything from TV show to a book to a person to anything. So actually, Corey has volunteered to go first. I'm so excited. Please present whatever it is you're thinking about as far as a comedy thing that is not film that you like.
I think it's a digestive. You've just eaten 3.5 pounds of red meat and and 2 potatoes, and you need something to kind of bring you back down to earth. So the thing when you asked me to think about a comedy thing that I particularly enjoy, I realized it's something that I didn't even know it had a name. I didn't even know it was a thing growing up. And now now you call it a cartoon meme. There's a whole industry. Some of your viewers may know about this. It's sort of there's this whole culture of deconstructing Garfield cartoons. There's one called Garfield Without Garfield, where the character of Garfield is erased from the strip, leaving John as this strange, existential, terrified creature wandering around in a void. There's one called Garfield Thrown Out the Window. There are various remixes by all kinds of different cartoonists who sort of turn it into gothic horror. I love this idea of the remix, of taking the meme and just reworking it. I guess I hadn't thought about it before, but after talking about Team America, I like humor that breaks down the scaffold. And when I was young, I was in high school, maybe this was even junior high. My friend Steven and I we were big fans of the comic strip Nancy. It's like the ultimate unfunny of old school comic strip, and we would just we would rewrite and we would just add our own dialogue, or we would make up stories of like what is happening in this strip that makes absolutely no sense. So I guess unknowingly I was memifying it, and I mean there's a famous mix-up where Dennis the Menace and the Far Side ran side by side in a newspaper, and the editor accidentally swapped their captions, and so the caption ends up with Dennis the Menace at the dinner table looking at his mother, saying to her, "I see your small petrified skull sitting on a shelf." It's like these things that just like mess up the artifice of comedy. So I guess apparently I really enjoy cartoon memes, and especially Garfield memes. I can't quite explain why, but like Garfield thrown out the window, this idea like every panel ends with a defenestration, and sometimes it makes sense, and sometimes it is like completely out of the blue, but it just sort of always implies that there's some extra action that you didn't see between the panels, and I love that. I love that thing of like this secret universe that's messing with you. I like Dadaist deconstructed memes, which is sort of a pretentious way of saying, I like things that like fuck with Garfield.
Yeah. So the Garfield meme.
I'm sorry. I like things that mess with Garfield.
So Garfield memes, I love that as a topic. I remember in the 90s, Dysfunctional Family Circus, where they would take the Family Circus cartoons and mess with them, and do really sad things with them. And then, of course, I was just into that whole underground comic scene like that was involved with Fantagraphics. And I know Mark Newgarden used to mess with Nancy.
Yeah, Mark Newgarden did that. And R. Sikoriak, I don't even know his first name. He just calls himself R. Sikoriak. Yeah. He did a lot of the things also kind of messing with them. He applied the mindset of the Far Side to all the other comics, and then drew like Apartment 3G and Family Circus and a bunch of other cartoons as if Gary Larson had written them. And it was very funny, and it's like third or fourth level meta humor.
I do love that. I love it because I was a big cartoon fan and all that stuff. So yeah. All right. And so my comedy coda, I'm going to talk about a book called My Little Blue Dress by Bruno Maddox. Now, I know Bruno. I'm friendly with Bruno. We're really just acquaintances. We don't keep in touch. So I don't want the audience to think I plug my friends, because I hate it when people do that. I absolutely hate it. So, but I fell in love with this book before I really knew Bruno. So when I was working at Discover way back when with Corey, suddenly they hired this guy, Bruno Maddox, and like there was this buzz about him, and everybody's like, "Oh, Bruno's so cool." He was writing for like Travel and Leisure, and like
he was one of the last, maybe he was the last editor of Spy magazine.
And so he was in 1998, I think it is. 1998, he was promoted to editor-in-chief. He was the last editor-in-chief of Spy, the comedy magazine Spy magazine, and killed it dead. But
but I will tell you, so I've worked many years as an editor, and I've edited a lot of different pieces. I've mostly worked at science magazines, so I haven't edited a whole lot of humor, but I've edited some humor, and I've edited some science humor, which in particular is science humor is like the most godforsaken, awful genre. Like there's like almost
it's not much of a genre. Yeah,
there's almost people who can write about science are not funny. No. And people who think they're funny, who like science, are generally not funny. And so Bruno came on as a columnist for Discover magazine, and he wasn't exactly writing science humor, but he was writing in his voice, sometimes on vaguely scientific topics. And editing Bruno is the only time in my life that I've actually laughed to the point of having tears while editing somebody.
Yeah.
Never happened before, never happened since.
So I edited him for a year. He had a column in Discover called Blinded by Science, and I took it over for about a year. Now, the reason I took it over, so he started showing up at the office, and I immediately thought, this is an interesting guy. Like, he immediately made me laugh, and I could see he was a really interesting guy. Like, I like people who are just, immediately they're very different. And then I heard about that, not only that he had, edited Spy, but that he had written this book. And so this book came out in 2001. So it's just a few years earlier. So I was like, all right, what the heck? I'll read this book. And I fell in love with this book. I remember reading it twice in a row. Like, I finished it and then started it again. That's how much I liked it. So that's pretty, and I'm not a reader. I'm really not much of a reader. I tend to fall asleep when I'm reading, and especially novels. I tend to read nonfiction, and I loved this book. And that was when, so he started writing the column. And after a while, I insinuated my way. I was like, let me edit this guy because he kind of got tossed around a little bit. We actually got nominated for a National Magazine Award. The year I edited him, he was up against Christopher Hitchens, the New Yorker economics writer, and Fareed Zakaria. I mean, it was amazing. The point is, this book, I fell in love with it before I really knew him. So this book is a novel, but it's got a huge twist, which I'm going to give away a little bit. But it starts out as a memoir of a woman who's 100 years old. It came out in 2001, so it was just past the millennial marker. So she'd been born in 1900 and in England, and she was this. I'm actually gonna read a little bit, if you don't mind, little bits of it because it's so wonderful. So it opens. This isn't the first paragraph, but the problem for all the little girls with that. These were the early years of the 20th century, and we lived in a particularly rural section of England where, even by the standards of the day, people held very fixed and depressing ideas about how a little girl's life was supposed to unfold. Unless you were bedridden with polio or some other disease, they would generally allow you an idyllic country childhood. Lots of daisy chain making and cramming berries in your mouth as fast as you could pick them. But if by 17 years old you weren't married to a farmer, hiding his wage packet in case he drank away its contents, then you were officially declared a spinster, and you had to go start work immediately in the windowless village dairy where the hours were long and the wages microscopic. If this all sounds familiar to you, I can't say I'm surprised. It does sometimes seem these days as if every other book that gets published as an old woman's memoir begins exactly like this, with the author complaining about how tough it was to be a little girl. And I would be reluctant to add to that steaming pile of volumes if I didn't feel that few of them have even come close to capturing the true horror of what it felt like to wake up every morning in an unheated house to the knowledge that your future was A, set in stone, and B, bleak. It was one of the worst feelings you can imagine. Or so I gathered. Thanks to a fluke of genetics, I wasn't faced with either of the grim scenarios outlined above, but was destined instead to be elected Queen of the May at our annual village fair, F-A-Y-R-E, after which, if tradition held, the world would essentially be my oyster. And that's how it starts. And it's really beautifully written like that. And I mean, it's even more out there than that. And the twist in this book is she kind of switches gears at one point and starts talking about this young man named Bruno Maddox, who is trying to romance a girl. And it's a little confusing, and you kind of are like, wait, what's going on? But you got to stick with it because it's a very high concept book. And it eventually turns into really a contemporary love story. And it's very romantic. I think it's a very romantic book. Let me see if I can find another passage, if you don't mind. The key to writing this thing, I've discovered, reader, incidentally, is absolutely not to hunch over the thing and strain to get it right. The key to it, the absolute key to it, it is just to sort of tilt your face back, put as much space as possible between your face and the screen, so the words are so tiny that you can hardly see them. And then just imagine you're standing at the top of some sort of metal slope pouring a jug full of liquid, and then it goes to end the next day's entry. Down the slope, the literary liquid runs, following its nose, its bliss from Thursday into Friday. And let me welcome you to Friday, reader, to Historic Friday Evening. I'm here with Bruno Maddox, and why didn't we say, for the sake of argument, that we were just coming to you live at approximately 1 a.m. in the morning? It'll just be me, unfortunately, because Bruno's passed out in a vomit-slathered heap beside the radiator and will not be able to give us an account of his evening. But the show must go on. Like the professional that I am, I shall think on my feet and deduce the events of the evening just past by examining the evidence at hand. And then she goes through. And so the whole thing is she's deducing Bruno's romantic life and relaying it to the reader. But by the end, you kind of realize what's really happening. There's really something else going on through the whole book. And it's wonderful. It's very clever. And again, just beautifully written. It's genuinely very funny and very romantic, like I said. So that's My Little Blue Dress. I hope I did it justice.
And then the 100-year-old woman, if I'm remembering correctly, she falls down dead and a cockroach crawls out of her mouth at the very end. Is that right? Am I remembering this correctly?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so that must be a different story.
That must be a different story. I want to compare it, though, to, and this is a book that Bruno, actually, I believe Bruno was the one who recommended I read this. And I brought this up recently because we were talking about Saturn III, and this book is actually based on Martin Amos's experiences with the movie, writing the movie, directed by Stanley Donen's Saturn III. And it has a similarity to it in that it's a guy who's really like kind of messed up, and, you know, this guy's a lot more messed up, but and he refers to himself. Martin Amos uses his own name at one point in this book, just like Bruno does. And I love these kind of books I'm not a huge reader, but I love books about men who are really kind of messed up and stumbling through life and, kind of romantically incompetent. I suppose I see myself in that. You don't see enough of women maybe like that. So it's a little hard to find those kind of books. Another great one is Tomcat in Love by Tim O'Brien, who's famous for his books about Vietnam. I mean, he's a really revered writer, but he wrote this comedy book that I don't think most people know about. That's the same kind of thing. It's about a guy who's just like middle-aged, takes advantage of women, but is kind of lovable in a way, just kind of very flawed, very, very flawed, but very genuinely funny. Like, I hate Portnoy's Complaint because that guy's just an egomaniac, and I just hate that guy. But these are very likable, messed up men, and I just love that kind of protagonist. And so I just wanted to throw those in also. So Bruno's My Little Blue Dress and Garfield Memes. That's our comedy coda.
Yeah.
And that's our show. Corey, I can't thank you enough. Thank you for
giving you a slow clap over here.
Thank you for co-hosting. Thank you for filling in for Joe. You now Joe's book.
I hope I did an adequate Joe.
I should say Joe's book's coming out in the fall. Congratulations to Joe. We are not mad at him. I was for a little bit, but we are no longer. I understand book deadlines. I wish I had a book deadline. You understand book deadlines. Corey's written a bunch.
I understand book deadlines, and I understand standing in. So
yeah.
Fake Joe.
Now I have to end the show with my catchphrase, which is comedy plus tragedy. No, wait. What is my catchphrase? Comedy is tragedy plus, and then I add something at this point that's funny, or I'm supposed to. So what I'm going to add is, it's funny because I was thinking memes also in a way. I was thinking memes. So comedy is tragedy plus cats with the word soon written above their heads or below their heads. And I'm going to show some of those cat. Now, remember lolcats? I love
the lolcat.
I used to stay up till 3:00 in the morning laughing at lolcats. I used to do that back in the aught years. I really did that. I loved lolcats. And so,
I'd forgotten about I Can Have Cheeseburger.
Innocent days. Those were innocent days.
Man, what a time that was.
That stuff was so funny back then. So anyway, I'm going to put up a few of those. But thank you, Corey. And I hope you'll come back.
Okay. Thank you.